Hello, this is a short video to explain to you the JOG approach to vocabulary instruction. At Donegal, we take the approach to vocabulary instruction very seriously, as we do all aspects of literacy. We are drawing upon research done by the EEF, the Education Endowment Foundation, who gather together lots of small-scale projects and look into what particular approaches make the most impact in terms of literacy. In terms of vocabulary instruction, one of their key pieces of advice for literacy in the secondary school is that we should be providing targeted vocabulary instruction in every subject. And at John O'Gaunt, over the last year, we have been piloting an approach to this that you have had some communication about quite recently. So, what is the question if the answer is 50,000? Well, the question would be, how many words does a typical successful secondary school student have in their armoury by the time they leave secondary school? It's 50,000 words, which seems quite a lot. And for many of our students, we need to encourage their word acquisition, we need to foster word curiosity, and we need to enrich every aspect of their curriculum experience with a particular focus on vocabulary. Because in fact, vocabulary is a bit like Velcro. The more words you know, the more hooks you have for others, and obviously the better able you are to communicate with others in both an oral capacity and in written work. For us at John O'Gaunt, vocabulary is the very fine grade detail of the picture of curriculum. If we take curriculum as being a grand sweep of knowledge, if we were to distill that curriculum content down into its very essence, down into the fine grade detail, we would end up with the words, the key words that form the basis of that curriculum. If you like, it is the language, the vocabulary that is the microcosm, the small little world of the bigger picture of the curriculum. And the heartening thing about vocabulary is that small things on a daily basis aggregate over time. You can focus just on one particular word, and that can help unpick a whole host of other words. If you think about the synonyms for the word you're particularly looking at, the antonyms, the opposite words for the word that you're looking at, if you explore the etymological roots and the word history of the word you're looking at, and you look at the morphological parts of the prefix or the suffix or the root of that word, that one word, that focus on one word, can help unpick not only the meaning behind the word, but also make the connections to lots and lots of other words. And that is how we build up our word acquisition over time. Most importantly for us at John of Gaunt, we realised that word knowledge and a specific focus on helping students to build that word knowledge also supports their world knowledge, their knowledge of the world beyond John of Gaunt, beyond their own lives. Having word knowledge broadens their horizons, it builds their awareness of the world around them so that ultimately they can be an active participant in it. And therefore we feel it is important to have a far more active approach to teaching vocabulary across the curriculum in order to foster this word awareness and curiosity. And this all ties in and builds on our use of our active reading strategy, our use of Vipers, and you can see another video on this also on the website, one strand of which is vocabulary in particular, because we know it's really important to support students to decode what they are reading, looking at the fine grade detail of vocabulary for themselves. A lot of the research evidence base would suggest that one really key strategy to increase the stickability and knowledge of new words is actually to focus on an etymological approach and a morphological approach. Often, if you delve into the word history of words and where they come from, their Latin or their French roots, the stories that you can unravel behind those words really make those words come alive and make them far more memorable, and therefore students are much more likely to use them. At John O'Gaunt, wherever possible, we will delve into the etymological roots of particular key words that we have identified as something we want to definitely teach. The other approach is the morphological approach, something you may be used to coming from primary school, where we know that words are made up of constituent parts. We can have prefixes, we can have roots, we can have suffixes, and they're a bit like Lego. You can stick them together in multiple different ways. And what those prefixes, roots and suffixes can give us are clues as to what new words might mean. If we know what photo means, or we know what sin means, or we know what thesis means, then the next time we have a word involving any of those, we can use the clues from the words that we already know and use that clue to give us some ideas to what a new word might mean. So the morphological approach is another thing that we try to explicitly teach at John O'Gaunt. We know it's really, really important to help your children to foster word consciousness and word curiosity. We have numerous word walls set up around the school, which are active, they're not static, they constantly change. We're collecting words. It's a really dynamic process as far as we're concerned, and as a parent we would really encourage you to do the same at home. We have got a JOG vocabulary bookmark where you can encourage students, your students and your children, to collect the words that they notice and they really like, or the words that they notice and they're really struggling with. It would be a real help to us if you could do the same thing as we're doing at school at home. In order to embed new words, we also know that we need to build in repetition. So words transfer from the short-term working memory and then they move to the longer-term stored memory, where students can draw upon them at will without having to work too hard. And knowing all of this research and knowing all of the various approaches to vocabulary, we have devised our own approach at John O'Gaunt to the explicit instruction of vocabulary. And we have a commitment to do this, not only at John O'Gaunt, because we think it is really, really important, but it is an absolutely key planned for target for Excalibur Academy Trust, and John O'Gaunt is obviously part of Excalibur. So it is a real push for us that we are driving this planned explicit instruction, particularly of Tier 2, but also of Tier 3 vocabulary for years 7, 8 and 9. And all that means is that Tier 2 vocabulary is the tricky, academic, sophisticated language that successful students on the whole tend to use. And Tier 3 vocabulary is the subject-specific vocabulary linked to particular subject disciplines that students really need to know in order to succeed in a particular curriculum area. We know that it is really important to pre-plan the vocabulary that we are going to teach and embed that within our curriculum model so that we know exactly which words we are going to drive forward. So the first stage in our approach is that we select and pre-select which words are likely to be difficult, which words are likely to be useful, which words are likely to be challenging, which words are absolutely key to a student understanding and unpacking aspects of the curriculum. We then, once we've done that, are going to explain what these words mean, encourage the use of student-friendly definitions, and begin to look at the morphology of the words and perhaps the etymology of the word if that is appropriate. And then, because we know that it's really, really important to apply what we're learning and to repeat the use of these words, and so that students become familiar, we then explore those words in more detail, and we get them to use it, we get them to apply it in various different ways so that they are able to consolidate their use and then be freely using these particular words in their own writing and in their own speech. Because ultimately, although there's a focus on vocabulary at the minute level, this all filters into your children's ability to write, and not just write uh, in a general fashion, but to write specifically like a scientist writes, or to write like a geographer writes, or to write like a sports person or historian or a mathematician, so that instead of using quite woolly language, quite bland, quite basic, the sort of sentences that you are seeing on the left there, they instead have been taught to use the more sophisticated tier 2 language that you see on the right. And obviously that's the sort of language that we're aiming for. So this focus on vocabulary bleeds into their capacity to write in a sophisticated and articulate way. At McGawn, we use the Freya model, which is effectively a template where we have the key words that we teach, we have a student-friendly definition, we give an example of that word within a sentence, we have synonyms for the word, we have antonyms for the word, and then we might have a picture or visual cue to help them understand it even further. And that's the initial way we might introduce a particular new word. In some cases, in some subjects, instead of having synonyms and antonyms, we might have examples or non-examples. And then, because we know we need to repeat this focus on particular words several times, in fact, the researchers suggest at least 5 times, we ensure that we repeat the introduction of these words over some time. And we might get them to match the definitions for the keywords, as the example shows on the screen. Or we might ask them to identify the examples and non-examples, which are the right examples or which aren't the right examples. We might get them to match the keywords to the visual clues, and we might then get them to use the word within a sentence of their own making, just to double check that they have understood it. And if you are a parent of a student in year 7, 8 and 9, you may well have seen the vocabulary list that we're putting together now on a termly basis. Last year was our pilot year and we did it with year 7, and this year we're rolling out a similar approach to year 8 and year 9, and you should be receiving these lists on a termly basis. We would encourage you to talk about these lists with your children at home, because these are the pre-selected words that we have identified as being at the core of our curriculum and worth pre-teaching and explicitly directly instructing students about. These vocabulary lists can also be found on the website under the curriculum tab if you just go and have a look in there, but they were also sent to you via parent mail. Ways you can support at home then. Please do encourage talk about words at home, foster that word curiosity with your children. You can use the word list as spelling sheets. You can use those word lists to help them think of synonyms or antonyms. You can yourself ask your children to use those words within sentences and apply those words in the correct way. You could yourself model how to incorporate some of those words into your everyday conversation, maybe play some word bingo whenever you use those words, you get a treat or something. And some interesting research has come out fairly recently about how you can support the acquisition of vocabulary simply by putting the subtitles on TV programs, and it almost goes in by osmosis. They don't even notice that somehow they are reading the words on the screen and accumulating more vocabulary as they do that. There is also the JOG vocabulary bookmark. It's a fairly simple thing just to encourage the collection of words that they come across that they like on the green side, or to flag up tricky words that they might need extra support with. And that template is also on the web page under curriculum. If you've got any questions about our approach to vocabulary at John of Gaunt, please do contact us. Thank you very much.